Hello, America. I'm Lyle Rapacki, and this is Arizona Today. This is actually a very special segment of Arizona Today. I'm not in a studio. I'm actually on scene in Phoenix. Now, normally I'm in Prescott, where it's cooler. I'm down here in Phoenix, where I think it's 300 degrees or 350 today. I don't remember. And that's why I moved to Prescott, because at least it's cooler up there. But I'm on scene at a church with a number of parents who have gone through a traumatic experience, and many are still going through it, with the Arizona family court system. The last 3 months, the Arizona legislature has done an intensive investigation, joint legislative hearings on the family court system in Arizona, and what has come out of it is a lot of trauma and a lot of abuse to both parents and children. If you go to my website, you'll see that I've posted both all-day hearings. There were 7 hours. I would suggest you take a little piece of Kleenex with you when you sit down. What you're going to hear, the testimony of those coming before the legislature, is not just daunting, it's very troubling, but it's very emotional. You're going to hear adults who have been basically abused, not to the degree that some of their children have been, but they've been abused in a number of ways. One of the major ways that we've uncovered is the financial abuse. There are adults who have attempted to save their children after a divorce and in a bitter custody battle, and it has cost them $2 million. One family I met, $5 million. I'm not making this up. This is part of testimony, and the documentation has been well presented and received. Today, in this special hearing, this special segment, and we're going to be 2 parts. So again, you'll see Arizona Today Part 1 and Arizona Today Part 2. I'm conferring with parents who have gone through the trauma of the family court system in Arizona. Some are still going through it. Some of their children are still very much involved in this system. You're going to hear today from parents who had already gone through the tragedy, the emotional of a divorce, but for year after year went ahead and dealt with custody issues, up to the point where they were referred to family court and they were ordered to undergo intervention. You're going to hear from people who've gone through the tragedy of not just the divorce, but years of having to deal with custody issues, and on top of that, complicated even more so, or compounded, the financial, the emotional, the abuse that has come out and yet has been ignored by the family courts and by professionals. It's hard to understand. It may be hard to grasp. You may have to watch this segment and the next, ponder it, and then go back and look at the 2 all-day hearings before the legislature. You'll hear consistency. You'll hear far more evidence than we can do today, but you'll hear consistency, and you'll hear from people who have lived through this, and they've not made it up. They've been looking for a voice. They've been looking for an outlet. They've been looking for a platform by which they can share their hurts, their griefs, and what is still taking place to them. So thank you for joining me today, and I pray that if this is taking place in your state, you'll notify Senator Mark Fincham of the Arizona State Senate and or Representative Rachel Kessel of the Arizona State Legislature. Now, 6 states have already notified Arizona that they have a very, very similar set of circumstances and traumas in their states. Senator Fincham was going to be here today, but he is up in Idaho testifying before their legislature on the same issue: family courts, custody issues, and what has become known as judicial tyranny, judicial trauma. This is not made up, and it's not sensational. It's not theatrical. And unfortunately, what you're going to hear today are people behind me who have experienced the same. And they're going to share with you their testimonies before the legislature were absolutely validated. Their documents were validated. And now I've provided this platform for them to come out a little bit more informally and share what's really taken place and what may still be taking place in their lives and in the lives of their children. So 6 other states are now experiencing this, and there may be more. We've learned that Arizona became the hub of this several years ago, and that a couple of individuals in Arizona actually began to market this process to other states. It's a money-making deal. And what you're going to hear is not, I would say, any different than the issues I already mentioned, bringing up to $5 million that parents have paid. A lot of these parents have paid $200,000, and we're going to hear more. So thank you for joining me today on Arizona Today. Thank you for caring enough that you've written in. A number of you across the nation have written in asking for something like this. And I've passed along your emails, your phone calls to the legislature who's actually doing the investigation. So if I haven't gotten back to you in Georgia, North Carolina, New Jersey, Michigan, I go on. Please don't read into that. It's been overwhelming. So thank you so much for tuning in. And please, you can do something that really will help. If you find this show, this information pertinent, proper's in a quote, then get it out. Send it out to your email list, because we need to inform people across this country that this is a lot more of a problem than just in Phoenix, Arizona, or in the Valley of the Sun. So thank you so much. Thank you, parents here. I've got parents and a daughter. I'll talk with her in a minute. But I have parents here who have actually undergone this situation. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Be careful, it's my show. I'll edit you, but correct me if I'm wrong. Each of you have undergone the series of problems associated with having your child or children maintain some sort of custody with your ex. I got that one right, okay? So you're here because you've gone through this custody issue. You've gone through the divorce. That's hard, we know. And now you're trying to at least maintain some sort of custody, joint custody with your ex, but when you went into this with good intentions, it became a nightmare almost overnight. Do I have that wrong so far? I do? I don't? Okay. Which one of you, and I know there'll be 2, 3, 4, 5 of you, would like to share just briefly what happened when you went to family court to begin the discussion on custody with your ex-spouse? Who may I have that will come forward right now? Okay, ma'am, let me get you a microphone. And what I'd like to do is, will you take a few minutes and share with us? You went into family court, you're already divorced, and you're working out of custody. You have one child or two?
One, sir.
One child? So you have one child, and you're working out a visitation plan between you and your former husband.
Correct.
Okay. And those can be somewhat complicated because of the days of the week. We all know that. But I'm going to suggest, and you correct me, and I mean this now, you went in with good intentions to say, no, my ex-husband, it's his son. Is it son? You have a boy or?
Stepson.
Stepson? So you went in with the intention to make sure that both of you could have relationship with the son, with the boy.
Correct.
What happened?
I had raised my son for 12 years. And in California, I am a teacher and a school principal. And we had gone to court to establish a custody situation where he can go back and forth. And I was informed that I was an unfit parent and that my son was in danger in my care, despite me being an educator in California and being in charge of an entire school of children. I knew the court wouldn't give me any custody, so I had tried to work out a plan with my ex-husband. So for 6 months, I was raped while I was able to have a quasi-custody. And when we went back to court, I was the one who was held in contempt of violating a court order. And to this day, I still do not have custody of my son. It's been 6 years.
You other parents, you've gone into family court to deal with custody issues after your divorce so your sons and daughters could have some relationship with your ex-spouse. I'm doing okay? You went in with good intentions to make this happen. What were you surprised about as soon as you went into the family court system? Somebody? Microphones? Right there. Good, good. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
So the biggest thing that I was, is this working? Check. So the biggest thing that I was surprised by is how much the courts would actually intimidate you to produce an outcome that that the court was wanting to achieve, as opposed to the outcome that we as parents, the mother and myself, were trying to achieve. So there was a lot of coercion, a lot of intimidation, right out the gates, and then by virtue of that intimidation occurring, that just incites one or both parties to start becoming more adversarial. And so I learned right out the gate that that the court system is adversarial, and these are two people. Regardless of what couple is involved, you're already adverse to one another in some respect. Otherwise, you would be together. And I think that's really the striking reality that you confront when you get into the guts of the family court system.
Has it been your experience, all of you, you can just raise your hand if it has, that the family court system in your custody issues was adversarial from the outgo, from the beginning? Were you surprised by that? I know it's not the best of times, but were you surprised by the adversity in the system? Yes? No? And you had a story?
Yeah. Excuse me. My case, I was an unmarried father. So stepping into the family court system, I had no idea that basically I had no rights, no legal rights, and that was really just really heartbreaking, for me, and just not knowing where to go, how to start, and then just being there almost a stepfather to her other two children, and then my daughter at 6 months being taken, just being ripped away from false allegations and stuff like that. It was just like I've never been in any trouble, and just trying to figure out where to start. Where to start with, like trying to get this these false this order of protection removed, which was she tried to put it on with her and so I couldn't see my daughter. So those things were being leveraged as weapons to be, from being taken away from my daughter.
Now, one of the things that we became aware of with the testimonies before the legislature is that each parent, and correct me here, this is partly informational, okay? So if we got something wrong, let's get it out and correct it. Each parent, so each of you who went into family court, almost one of the first things that was required is for you to fill out an affidavit of financial assistance, financial information. Yes? Okay. It may have been called a couple of different things. I have an affidavit of financial information based on the testimonies that were given. What we heard in the legislative panels was and I mentioned it just in the introduction, the amount of monies that parents have had to pay into the entire custody issue. And it's still ongoing in many circles. Okay, I'm still doing okay? Okay. Can I just go on down the road here? Which I'll start either way. Will you share? And it's okay if you can't. Do not hang your head. It's all right. Can you share what it has cost you? Can I have a microphone over here? What has it, and let's just share the mic. What has it cost you to fight this custody issue?
For me, I'm getting towards the tail end of my divorce and stuff on it, which is because my daughter's emancipated. But what bothered me was 2 years ago when I went back to court on something or an issue on it, and we were having evidentiary trial, whatever, and they changed judges on me to some meaning to Michael Valenzuela. Michael had no background in family court, and he basically ignored all the evidence regarding things. It took away my joint custody that I was supposed to have, and unfortunately then it forced me to be paying child support when I was at 0, and now it's basically I have all these arrears going on, and I'm at a point where I'm trying to land full-time work at age 67. It's not happening, and therefore I have these arrears. I'm down to the point where I almost in bankruptcy because I'm stuck with these arrears, and the court's just not going to care about that. Which if I hadn't had that, I would be at 0. I would be off in a good situation. But now I'm at a point where I have to file forms today in terms of that to fight the situation. And I don't think the court's going to give a damn about whether I have arrears or not. They're going to force me to do something. Okay. So you're talking about really, like $3,000 to $4,000, which I shouldn't have had in the first place.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm probably somewhere around $500,000 that I've lost. And that doesn't include child support orders and arrears that are due to me that the court does not enforce. And it's interesting because you'll see cases where child support is ordered and arrears will amass and they won't do anything. And then they come in and flip custody to the other parent that is the preferred parent, and then add a child support order for that parent, and they'll enforce it in that case, but not in the other case. But then again, the legal representation or the 730 evaluators or the therapists, it's around $500,000.
Okay.
Nowhere near. I've heard some of these numbers from the hearings though, but I'm probably in a good about 40,000. But it's still 30,000 that I could have had. I've emptied out my daughter's savings account that I started with her when she was born. She's 11 now, and about 25K in arrears, and probably another 20 that I've spent on attorney fees and stuff as well too. So.
Okay.
As an educator in California, I've spent about $150,000. I had to sell my home to be able to afford the reunification sessions to be able to see my son. For 5 consecutive years, I had requested the court to grant me reimbursement of my legal fees since my ex made almost more than 3 times what I made as a teacher. And consistently, I was denied the reimbursement of legal fees.
With the assignment of mental evaluations, paying to see your own child, being on supervised visitations, which end up could be lasting for years. In my case, years was the course it took.
Just hold on.
Just on those 2 things alone, probably close to $40,000. And again, like so many others, I had a beautiful house in Ahwatukee that I no longer have. I had a truck, a car, a motorcycle. No longer have any of those. I now have a 20-year-old vehicle because the courts basically suck you dry. I mean, they literally don't care if you don't have the money to pay for something. If you don't pay for it, you lose your child. So you do everything possible to do that. You take a second job. I mean, you could be driving for Lyft or Uber after you get done with an 8-hour job, just to pay some of these expenses, and you still lose in the long run, no matter what. You're losing. You're fighting an uphill battle because it's not about your child. It's about how much money you can provide for that person doing your mental evaluation or that person doing your supervised visitations, and they don't want it to stop because they're not regulated. There's only maybe 1 or 2 companies statewide that actually train their people that do supervised visitations. And those are the people you want, those people that can be held accountable. But they're few and far between, and most people don't know about them because they're not widely used in the courts, because they will give an honest opinion. They will call out the bad parent. Like I said, there's only a couple of those. And they don't want to be watching your kid and you for a year or 2 years or 3 years. They want it to get done and over with so they can move on. There's other people that need help.
Okay.
But basically, if you get into a family court and you're the target, you're going to go bankrupt.
Okay, thank you.
For me, my case lasted 8 years, and I would estimate the losses in the 275 to $300,000 range. A great bulk of that would be to pay the court appointees that were forced upon me, coerced upon me, best interest attorney, who I would call a professional kidnapper, visit supervisors. We shared a supervisor. I spent at least $100,000 paying a visit supervisor, despite the fact that I've never been documented or to have any mental illness whatsoever. I've been tested so many times by so many different mental health care providers, I'm a productive member of society. I have a medical doctorate. I have a DEA license. I don't have a criminal record, but my child was withheld from me for 4 years, and I was essentially extorted to be able to have contact with my own child.
Thank you. That will.
We all have had massive problems with the dollar figures, whether it's millions or it's hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands. Bottom line is, most of them say we gave all, and that's where we're at. And I can give you dollar figures. I can tell you the weaponization of this and that and what happened, and where they go. But ultimately, given everything to the point of bankruptcy, and just being told that you have to figure it out, and you're just left with that when there's no other recourse. So whether you give 1 penny or you give 1 million, and you give everything of yourself to protect your child and protect your situation, you're at zero ultimately. And in a position where the power that be, if they wanted to, could in effect civil warrants, put you in jail, incarcerations, all those kind of stuff, which everyone up here is probably facing. So who gave more, whether someone gave $1 million or someone gave a penny? But ultimately, if you gave everything you have and you have nothing left, what else do you have?
Yes, because they're well aware that anyone that loves their children would do anything for them. I was in the range. I stopped counting at 250,000 because it was just gross to keep counting. But I would say it's under 300,000 over the course of from 2011 to 2018, and I would have spent more if it was necessary to protect my children. And everybody involved is aware of that. They're aware that you will do anything to protect your children. I'm grateful that I had attorneys that were very reasonable with me, because I'm an educator as well, and we don't make a lot of money. At the time I was an educator. I have a different degree now, but I had attorneys that they knew the opposing party had a lot of money, so they would wait for me to be able to get some assets in the division to then pay them. I'm so grateful that I had that. Otherwise, I don't know what I would have done.
It is disgusting to start trying to figure out those numbers, because since 2022, I would say I could easily show you documentation of $150,000 in attorney and therapy bills for my children. I thankfully am not on. I've done very well trying to avoid some of those other people. So.
Yeah, so in my case, I think personally I had over $75,000 in legal fees alone. tack on the various court-appointed experts, the psychologists, and the number goes up close to 120K. So for me, that was pretty astonishing, and when you think about how much good that money could do for my child, that was probably my biggest concern. But on top of that, I realized that my ex has got to be paying a small fortune because she had 10 different attorneys at different points in time. Turns out she had inherited a large sum of money from her family, and every cent of it, close to $300,000, went to her legal fees. So between the two of us, very close to $500,000.
So what I'm hearing you each say, and please correct me if I've got this wrong, okay? What I'm hearing you say is that the monies that you have spent and may still be spending are for the best interest of the child to get through whatever bumps there may be or have been in this custody issue, and that you were doing all that you can through the interventionists, through the counselors, to make the road smooth and to make the transition back and forth every week, every 2 weeks, whatever the court ordered, make it really non-complicated, and to make it so the child or children had the best time relationship that's imaginable between you and your spouse. And so the interventionists were there to make sure that the child was taken care of and that the child was not going to be damaged. Am I doing okay thus far? No? Yes? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. You can correct me. We've heard all sorts of stories. That's why I'm trying to get to the experts here and find out. Go ahead, ma'am.
So I would say I don't agree that they did their best for those reasons.
No, it's okay.
My case was one that was settled in Ohio, where my ex-husband and I made an agreement that I would have full custody of the children and move to Arizona as 4 children, in exchange for me waiving all child support, signing a paper saying that he would never have to have any responsibility for the children. Because of domestic violence, he didn't want to go to jail and pursue it. So when we got to Arizona and he 2 years later followed us here, it was very obvious to me and so many other people who were involved that the parties that were assigned to the case did not have the best interest of the children. They did the AFI to see how much money we had. They saw that I was a protective parent. They saw that he was willfully unemployed, and they pretty much determined that this woman will do anything for her children. What does she have? Let's squeeze it out and let's, get as much as we can get. And so I think that's really what it came down to. I have no doubt that the interest of my children was not prioritized. In fact, it was stated that my children were too articulate and therefore they were not credible in their reports of the abuse that was going on, despite the fact that there was physical evidence. So I do not agree with that.
And so and that's perfectly fine. That's what I want to know. I want to know what I may be presenting that you who've lived it have gone through that we haven't heard yet. We haven't seen yet. We haven't, okay, so that's what I'm doing. I'm asking you. You're the experts on it. So the child, the child's best interest, now correct me on this, who would disagree? The child's best interest was, in your opinions, not always put forward. Am I doing okay? Never.
Court.
Okay.
It was the best interest of the court always, but the best interest of the providers and the money.
All right,
that
let
they
me
can
do
get.
that. So from your perspective, correct me now, it was the best interest of the court put forward. Okay. Let me go another route. It was the best interest, that's in quotes because the best interest of the interventionists, not the child. Yes? And in both cases, be it in the best interest of the court or in the best interest of the child, monies were going out. And the monies that were being submitted, there doesn't appear to be, from what you're saying and from testimony we've heard, doesn't appear to have resolved anything. It's just like an empty stovepipe. You just keep putting money into it. Would you agree with that? Or yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Here, give her a microphone.
Yes, in my case, the therapist, Jessica St. Clair, was actually prosecuted for insurance fraud, and therefore I was forced to only pay cash in order for her to increase her profit margins, and the reports that went to the court were completely falsified. So the court only...
The reports from the therapist or
To
the
the court.
interventionist were falsified.
Correct.
And this became known?
Yes, yes.
What came of that?
Nothing. I was denied custody of my son. I was denied visitation. And the ironic part is in
I
California.
got to challenge you. So I'm submitting to this gentleman right here, he's the court, I'm submitting a false document, false case, false charges about you.
Yes,
Okay, it's all false.
right.
And yet nothing came of it. The
No.
court did not rule for either another evaluation or.
Nope. They just took her at face value despite me just spending 6 months with my son while I was being raped by my ex-husband, and I had quasi custody of my son. And the therapist lied in her reports and said that I was an unfit parent, I was uncompassionate, and I did not have the best interest of my child at heart. And the court did not question her reports at all, just took it at face value. And she's no longer, by choice, practicing in the Orange County courts.
Okay. Julie?
Hi. Yeah, we find that the court-appointed therapists or evaluators or whatever their title is, therapeutic interventionists, are perceived and addressed by the court as they can do no wrong and they're above reproach. But that is not the case. They are routinely across pretty much every state. I have become an investigative reporter and people reach out to me constantly, nonstop. And they lie. They commit perjury. They commit fraud upon the court. Parents are going up against the other parent who may have more finances, who has the attorney. And when a pro per, that's somebody who doesn't have an attorney, or has the lesser of the two attorneys, maybe they don't want to buck the system, maybe they just want to go along to get along because they don't want to upset the other opposing counsel or the judge. But typically, that parent is silenced, targeted, retaliated against in form of having to go to reunification therapy or pay bills, ordered to child support that they can't afford, and it's just prolonged. It's like this hamster wheel to oblivion where money just goes in and in and in, and the children suffer greatly.
So what I've heard repetitively, not just this morning, but we've heard testimony, is that the best interest of the child or children is not regarded. You're okay? Go.
Information.
Say again?
The affidavit of financial information is what's regarded.
So I was in a more rural county, so we did not have therapeutic interventionists and things like that, which I'm very grateful for. There were not enough services for those up there, but I still saw my children, their needs be totally neglected by the court. And in that case, the court, it was just kind of, it was like an imposition that we were even there. We were just taking their time. And I, being a school teacher, I know how it is. Kids come up at recess. He did this, she did, and you're just like, okay, just get along. And you go play, you go play. And the court kind of just does that. They just seem to have no tolerance whatsoever for the time to put on their schedule to spend doing this. They're just, oh, you people fighting, split the baby in half, go. And so we didn't have an interventionist. I did unknowingly request, I'm going to have a custody evaluator, somebody, that's thoroughly could understand this stuff to do it. So we had Dr. John Moran, who's in Scottsdale, who's been a custody evaluator for 30 years. I gave him all the evidence I had. I had tons of recordings, things to corroborate what I was saying. And so he went over all of it, wrote a 75-page paper. It cost $29,000, which I feel like that's pretty much highway robbery, $29,000 for a 75-page paper. The judge that I had, my attorney said that there's no way he could have read that paper in the short amount of time that we had in court. There's no way he could have read 75 pages. And his ruling completely disregarded the report was in my favor and said if the children have been hurt by father and they're going to continue to be hurt by father, he must get intensive psychological counseling from this particular therapist. Once the therapist says he's safe, then he can spend more time. It said, it laid it all out. And this Dr. Moran was who my ex had chosen to do it. So I was fearful, but I had so much evidence. So even though he chose him, it went in my favor and the judge completely disregarded it, split the baby, and sent us on our way. He was out of the courthouse driving away in his sports car before I even got to leave. I saw him like,
Okay,
oh,
so-
have a good weekend.
So, and I'm not pushing you, but I am
Sure.
a little bit. I just want to make sure I'm really, really understanding this. I don't doubt your veracity, but
Yeah.
the best interest of the child or children, in your opinion, your experience, was not regarded in each of your cases. Is that right?
Not at all.
Okay, all right, hang in there. And I'm doing this again. Hang in there, okay? The best interest, the welfare of your child or children was not regarded by the courts. And if you turned in any information, I'll not say evidence, but any information that would suggest that the child or children are suffering at the hands of this custody, but also at the hands of the non-custodial parent, that was disregarded.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go further. The best interest of the child, I know this is repetitive on purpose, the best interest of your child was not regarded when they came home and said, Mom and Dad on the other side abused me, hurt me, and fill in the adjectives, right? And you would take that information and give it to the therapeutic interventionist, and in some cases the court. And you would take this information as the child was giving it to you and report it. So you'd write it out or you'd give it to them very specifically. Am I doing okay? And what I'm hearing you say is nothing came of it.
Right, you're punished if you do that, and the research shows that. You, and my attorney even said that, if you are the one that brings the allegations of abuse forward in court, you're seen as the problem. You're seen as the one that's continuing the drama rather than just trying to get along, and so you're punished. And research shows that, corroborates that. If you are the one that says, hey, there's abuse, internal bias of court personnel, DCS workers, law enforcement, they go off of their internal bias rather than research-backed practices, and they think, oh, I think you're just saying that to try to get a leg up in the divorce, and you are punished.
Okay.
In my case, it was an interesting thing. We were very good with joint custody on a 5225 plan. We never had interventionists involved on it for a long time, right up to 2022. And then my daughters were turning 16. They were thinking, well, do we want to stay with dad, stay with mom, whatever things. When you live in an apartment, the other lives in a house, it makes it kind of a challenge in terms of there. But when they decided, when we had some kind of a conflict situation occur, they said that they were going to assign a CAA to us, of which we couldn't afford, neither one of us, but the court says you're going to have one. My judge required us to have one, in spite the fact that we did not want one. That interview, the lady interviewed me, she went and interviewed my ex, and then she went on her own in terms of making my two daughters to go interview her directly. And all they did when it came time to the trial is, for the most part, they interviewed the CAA and what her opinion was about me. Now, she wouldn't believe the negative things she was saying about me as far as my daughters are concerned, all for terms of there, so they could basically end up being where I lose my joint custody and be in a situation where I didn't have any of the evidence consideration. All they really did is consider what the AA was saying. So they used it against me, what they did.
Now, out here, ladies and gentlemen, on TV in Georgia, I've got some audience here, and I'm just going to, they're not rehearsed, none of this is. Has anybody in this audience experienced a very similar situation? Put your hand in, I didn't say raise it yet. You can have my microphone anytime you want. Have you experienced a very similar situation where your child or children, in the course of custody, back and forth visitation, have come to you and reported to you forms of abuse, horrendousness, whatever, and you've listened and evaluated it, and then you took it to the court or to the interventionists, the counselors, to try to get some help? Okay, you raise your hand first, so go ahead, sir.
Hi, I've been in the system. My son's been in the system for about 13 years, and I've had repeated documentation after documentation showing that my son has been, manipulated, alienated, psychologically abused, turned against me, weaponized, shown, court paperwork, and then sent over to our home to attack me I even, I've done so many things. Those things were not just on my accord, but other people's accord. I even had an expert witness in my last trial on May 5th with Michael Valenzuela, an expert witness of 53 years. And just because he wasn't part of the court system, I paid a lot of money to have this expert witness come in and testify about what was going on with my son. And that was all discredited by Michael Valenzuela. Instead of calling him doctor, he called him mister. But falsely accused over and over and over again. I'm not the only father here in this room. But in those all allegations have been found unfounded. And even though with the documentation showing that the allegations were false, my son was used as a, I guess by the courts because they knew that, that I provided, on the AFI that I have more money. And so they knew, like, all the parents up here said that I would fight until the very end, until my finances were exhausted for my son.
Okay. You had I saw you. You had your hand up, ma'am?
Yes, but my case is closed. I say my case is closed, but I will say, as far as as it pertains to what you're saying, as far as the courts, the best interests of the children do not matter. In my case, even in open court, my ex-husband confessed to the attempted murder of our son, the multiple attempted murders of myself in front of the children, the murder of our animals. And this was in open court, and it was on record. I submitted that he was a diagnosed psychopath, and there was a multitude of different risk factors. And he admitted that in family court, as well as me providing the documentation of all of this to be true. And I was still told that I have to give, the courts ordered me to still give him a pathway to the children.
Okay.
In my case, a hospital was the one that actually reported abuse, and DCS unfounded the reports. But my judge told me point blank that if anyone reported abuse to my child, that she would take custody from me.
The court said to you that if anyone reported abuse of the child,
Yes.
they would take the child from you.
Yes.
I'm going to push you.
Okay.
If anyone other than you reported the abuse, you did not abuse the child, but if someone else did, but if you reported it, they would remove the child from you?
If my co-parent is reported for abuse again, I will lose custody of my child.
Okay, thank you. You had something, ma'am?
So I have been in the court system a little over 3 years now, from the date of divorce. Our children started off when they were 4 and 6 years old. Now they're 10 and 7. It's cost me $105,000 to try to get a judge to help me. The biggest thing being my 10 and 7-year-old used to go to a counselor, but my ex-husband did not want to pay the counseling, so I was stuck with the bills. I pay child support. We're 50-50 with joint legal decision making. He withdrew the permission for the boys to see a counselor when they mentioned to me that he was passing out drunk on the couch. He has a problem with alcoholism that the courts have continued telling me it's not that big of a deal. Failed breathalyzers, etc. So he withdrew the permission for counseling when they mentioned that, but also because my 4-year-old started having some very manic separation anxiety, and I didn't understand why. Come to find out, it was because he had been leaving Witten home alone. When he wasn't waking up and getting ready quick enough, my 10-year-old and the dad would leave him for who knows how long in a house by himself. So he started having massive anxiety. They've been biting the skin on their thumbs, eating holes in their shirts, chewing things, temper tantrums, screaming and hollering. The 7-year-old now has manic episodes in his head. Tried to go to the judge pro se in trial because $105,000 did not get me a lawyer at trial. I tried to advocate for my children. The judge ruled that there was not enough proof, even though there were 800 pages of evidence. and she said that she would not enforce allowing me to get the boys into counseling. So my boys, for the last almost 3 years, have not been able to see a counselor, and the episodes are getting worse. They're starting to have suicidal ideations. It's been interesting.
Hold on just a second. Is there anything that you've just heard that is a surprise? No. Okay. Is there anything that you've just heard that is vastly different than what you've experienced? All right, let me remove the word vastly. Is there anything you've heard that is really different than what you've experienced, what you've gone through? Okay, all right. So you can relate to the trauma. I mean, go ahead, ma'am.
So for about 3.5 years now, I've been fighting specifically for my 15-year-old who was abused by her father, and there were 2 big incidences and 2. They were
No,
both
when you say abuse, be more specific.
physically abused.
I'm sorry?
Physically abused by her father.
All right, be more specific. Hit, kicked, strangled?
Tripped, pushed. There was a time where he shoved her in the car and took her headphones and broke them, and he recorded the audio, so there was evidence of that. And he also took a video of the first time when they were physical, and the judge saw both of those, and she basically she punished me financially, and my daughter saw a court-appointed therapist. She told the therapist all of this, everything that he's done. For 2 years she saw her, and even up this last order, it was completely full of lies of things that my child has never said and never happened, and it's all in the father's favor, so that I'll just keep coming back and fighting. So yeah, that's been.
I received an email this morning just minutes before I left to go to Phoenix. And I'm going to read just a portion of the email. The person sent it to me, went through this, is of age, but I don't have permission. I have permission to read part of this, all of it actually, from the note that I got, but I'm foregoing his name at this time because my understanding, and I could be wrong on this, is that he plans to file a legal action, and so I'm deferring so he can maintain contact with the legislature on this, and then go ahead and proceed with the legal action. But listen to these just couple of sentences on the topic that we're now discussing. Because I was not mean or a bully like my father thought I was gay. He began grooming me with pornography as early as 6 years of age. Sometimes he would get in bed with me while doing the pornography. I shared all of this with the intervention therapist, and he told my father everything that I said. So my father shut me up. The therapist then covered up the abuse I was suffering at my father's hands. The abuse I experienced wasn't limited to just my father. He married a woman, and she contributed to the abuse in her own way. My sister and I were denied basic necessities like toiletries and clothing. So my stepmother could continue her online shopping addiction. One year, I had a single pair of jeans for the entire year, one pair, which my mom bought for me despite being financially destitute in her own way. Meanwhile, my stepmother was receiving daily deliveries of shoes, clothes, and accessories. I reported all of this to the therapist, who did nothing on my behalf, but reported it to my biological father, who then punished me further. Not a surprise? No. Not a surprise that the intervention therapist did not step up to protect the child, to make the case for the court for the child? Nothing here is surprising you. Go ahead.
In my situation, was able to allow my children to go to a therapist that I had picked. Somebody who is truly in the best interest of the child, of children. I have two, sorry. She was with them for years. They absolutely adored her, loved her, trusted her. She was the one making the reports of what the children were saying. I did not make any reports. She did. The court hired a court-appointed advisor for the children, an attorney with no mental health experience, to recommend getting rid of that therapist, which is what happened. They ignored a 16-year trauma specialist, domestic violence specialist, LPC, for a court-appointed attorney with 13 years of law experience, and that's who they let my judge listen to. And my children got their loving, trusted therapist ripped away from them.
So thus far, what you're hearing from these parents out here is not a surprise to you, and I don't take that lightly. I'm just saying that you could be sitting out here and you could have been saying all that to me out here, right? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to choose to take a break right now and do a segment for those watching. The reason for, because I'm changing my agenda as this all unfolds. When we come back with segment 2, I want to continue this with some additional evidence and a witness that has actually lived it. Not that what they're saying is not true, not what you're saying, not what I read from that person is not true, but there's somebody here I want to introduce you to. But I thought about this, and this is already heavy, and I want to take a break, and I want you to take a break on film watching us, and then when we come back, we're going to pick up on this subject. So thank you from Arizona. I'm Lyle Rapacki, and that's how I see things at this time from Arizona today.